Wyoming, Ms. Cheney, and the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Banks, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's time is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to start our debate by talking a little bit about what the American people ought to expect of their leaders, of those who hold positions of public trust, the responsibilities that come with it. I've been thinking about these responsibilities for more than 50 years, and all the time I've been fortunate enough to hold a position of public trust. It doesn't matter if you're an alderman, a mayor, a member of Congress, President of the United States, or a staff member working as a civil servant or a political appointee. When you work for the public, when the people taxes pay your salary, these jobs come with serious rules and serious obligations. Dan Scavino and Peter Navarro both held positions of public trust. Mr. Scavino was a top communications official in the Trump White House. Mr. Navarro was a trade advisor. They each drew salaries paid by the American people to the tune of over $180,000 per year. They both were to abide by certain rules and obligations. They both swore oaths of allegiance to the Constitution. The Select Committee wants to talk to them, but about a lot more than their White House jobs. We want to talk to them about their roles in trying to overturn the 2020 election. We subpoenaed them for their records and testimony. They told us to buzz off. Not a single record, no shows for their deposition. Their excuse was, as former White House employees, the information we wanted, again, information about overturning an election, was shielded by executive privilege, a protection for the president to make sure sensitive official conversations stay private. In other words, they're arguing that their roles in trying to overturn an election had to stay secret because they had official roles as advisors to ex-president. If they want to make those claims, ridiculous as they sound, here's what the law requires. They need to show up and make those claims on the record under oath. They refuse to do that. That alone means they are in contempt of Congress. But I want to dig a little deeper into the argument these men are making. As I mentioned before, these are rules and obligations that bind public servants. One of the most important rules is that you can't do campaign work on government time or using taxpayers' money. Pretty straightforward. Plenty you can do on your own time, but not when you're on the clock. That's the law. If you've heard of the Hatch Act, it's probably been when a cabinet secretary or White House official had crossed the line from their official duties into political matters. In fact, in 2020, Mr. Navarro was dinged by a government watchdog for violating the Hatch Act by using official role to attack President Joe Biden. That law prohibits, among other things, someone from using, and I'm quoting, official authority or influence for the purpose of interfering with or affecting the results of an election. Sounds familiar? And in the case of Mr. Navarro and Mr. Scavino, trying to affect the results of an election wasn't knocking on doors or putting signs in people's front yard. They were trying to help a defeated president stay in power. It's not conceivable that their involvement in that effort could have legally overlapped with their official duties. But beyond that, it was a betrayal of the oath these men took. It was a betrayal of the public trust. Even if you do it on your own time, trying to overturn an election is still trying to overturn an election. And when we know that people who stormed this building on January 6th had the same goal, trying to overturn an election, that's what the Select Committee is investigating. That's why we need to hear from Mr. Scavino and Mr. Navarro. But as the Select Committee works to provide answers to American people, these two are saying, I worked at the White House when all this took place. Even if I was plotting to overturn the government, I was collecting a government salary at the time, so I don't have time to talk about it. Can you imagine? I've served my community and my country most of my life. Like my colleagues in this body, I've labored to uphold my oath and do right by the people I serve. I know my constituents expect that of me. To run into this kind of obstruction, this kind of cynical behavior as we investigate a violent insurrection is just despicable. It can't stand. Dan Scavino and Peter Navarro must be held accountable for their abuses of the public trust. They must be held accountable for their defiance of the law. They are in contempt of Congress, which is a crime. And I call on my colleagues to do their duty, to defend this institution and the rule of law, and to vote yes on this resolution. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Wyoming.